Welcome to Scope Management Collect Requirement Process PMP Certification Training. So under this section, we'll be trying to understand how you as a project manager, what are the techniques that is there and you are required to know in collecting requirements so that you can take maximum out of your end users in collecting the requirements. So this process is under the planning process group under the project scope management in the PMBOK. So collect requirements is a process of determining, documenting and managing the stakeholder needs and requirements to meet the project objectives. So you as a project manager, you need to understand what are the tools and techniques that is there that you could use in collecting the requirements of the end users. So as always, this process have certain inputs and some tools and techniques, and the outputs will be there. So let's discuss about the inputs. Let's discuss. So you as a project manager, it is very important that you get involved all the stakeholders, all the key stakeholders in discovering the requirements and decomposition their needs into requirements. So you will have to have a track with your stakeholders and you will have to take care in determining and documenting and managing the requirements. So you as a project manager, you are required to perform your skills and you will have to ensure that you will meet all the key stakeholders of your project and try to discover all the needs into requirements. And you as a project manager, you will have to take care and you have to ensure your team who is handling the project take due care in documenting all these requirements without missing anything. So as you know, the end users might not be open as you wish, and there can be some end users who are fully open and who are fully aware of their requirements, and also there could be certain other end users who has tacit knowledge about the requirements, but they do not want to express or they do not want to reveal the requirements due to various reasons. So you as a project manager need to understand what are the tools and the techniques are there in order to provoke them and get them to talk and so that you will capture all the needs into requirements. Because capturing the requirements is very important because it will directly have an impact on the work breakdown structure and the cost of the project and the schedule of the project, the quality planning of the project, the procurement parts of the project. So collecting requirements is a very, very important stage. So you as a project manager, you will have to understand that there are different types of requirements. When you go to a customer site, there can be different types of requirements, and these will be, first will be the business requirements. Business requirements are where the burning business issues or the burning business opportunities will be the business requirements of your end user. Maybe you're a project manager who are trying to implement an ERP system in an organization. So you as a project manager, you will have to understand the business requirement. What is the business case that they have decided to purchase the ERP system? Obviously, there can be business issues. Maybe there's a coordination issues, or there are inefficiencies in the warehouse, there are inefficiencies in the purchasing process. So those are maybe the business reasons or the business justified reasons for purchasing the ERP system. So you as a project manager, once you start collecting the requirements, then definitely you come across the business requirements of the customer. Then each and every key stakeholder will have the stakeholder specific needs and stakeholder specific requirements. Maybe the factory warehouse manager has a different set of requirements, and the warehouse manager has a different set of requirements. Maybe the procurement manager has a different set of needs. So you as a project manager will have to capture all the requirements of each and every key stakeholder. Also, sometimes there can be functional requirements. Functional requirements are requirements that are actually that is required by the customer. The functions of the ERP system, the functions of generation of a PO of the procurement module, or the functions, the key functions that the accounting staff that is expecting in the accounting module of the ERP system. And also there can be certain non-functional requirements. These could be maybe the uptime requirements, the 99.9% uptime requirement, any security requirements. Maybe your customer wants your system to be in line with ISO 27001 or in line with best practice cybersecurity practices. Or there can be performance requirements. Maybe you need concurrent 100 users to log in concurrent, and the response time which should be in sub-millisecond. So there can be non-functional requirements that you may come across when gathering the requirements. Also, there can be transition requirements. Maybe during the transition process of data migration process, there can be data conversion requirements. Maybe data migration requirements. There can be training requirements. Maybe the customer's IT staff may wants a training on the data mapping, on how the database parameter mapping from old system to the new system. So likewise, there can be transition requirements, and also there can be project requirements, there can be training requirements, there can be other various hardware procurement requirements which are more bounded with the project. And also, most importantly, there can be quality requirements. Maybe your customer is demanding software quality requirements, and maybe you're on a housing project, and the building of a building may require minimum quality standards of something to do with the construction industry. So these are the type of requirements that you come across, you as a project manager, when you go to a customer and start collecting the requirements. You might come across business requirements, stakeholder requirements, functional requirements, non-functional requirements, transition requirements, project management requirements, and also quality requirements. So as an input, the scope management plan input for the collecting requirements process, the scope management plan will govern you and will give you the process that you have already agreed with your team. This is how we are going to collect the requirements and the scope of the project. And this requirements management plan will give you the necessary governance process, that is how you would act and collect requirements from your customer. The stakeholder management plan will give you an input who are the key stakeholders and what are their interests, and what are the techniques that you will have to adopt in tackling each and every stakeholder of the project. As always, the project charter will give you a high-level description of the scope of the project and the requirements of the project, the goal of the project, the vision of the project. The stakeholder register again will identify the key stakeholders that you will have to go and meet and speak to get the requirements in. So let's look at what are the tools you as a project manager can use in collecting the requirements. Number one, you can do interviews with your end users. You can have formal interviews, or you can have one-on-one interviews formally, or might be over a simple chat. You can have informal interviews so that you can have some spontaneous questions, and sometimes a more structured interview. You could record your session and gather all the requirements that is spelled out by each individual stakeholder. Also, you can do focus groups. You can gather apart from one-on-one conventional interviews, you can gather several stakeholders into a room and have a moderator and have a time-boxed focus group discussion so that everybody will be concentrating and on the requirements of the business needs. You might also do some facilitated workshops into capturing the functional requirements. We'll discuss in a short time, and some of the facilitated workshops could be the joint application development called as JAD workshops, or brainstorming session, nominal group techniques. We're discussing on why these could be facilitated workshops that can be done in order to capture requirements. Also, you as a project manager could use tools such as mind maps, affinity diagrams, multi-criteria and additional analysis diagrams in order to capture these requirements. So affinity diagrams is a technique where you record all the ideas that is generated in a workshop or in a discussion on a focus group and into cards or notes. So here the technique is you record each idea generated by each member in the group on sticky notes or into cards, and then you try to group all the ideas that seems to be related into one section, and then once you are grouped, you can again group it at a very high level, and then you can go on like this, grouping and grouping and grouping, so that you get a clear summarized idea of the requirements. So once again, there can be many ideas that been generated during a discussion, and you can group it all similar related ideas into one, related requirements into one, and subgroup it and subgroup it and subgroup it, so that you will get a better grouping of the requirements. As I said, you as a project manager can use mind maps to capture the requirements. So there are mind map software available in the internet and also as tools where you can capture all the requirements of your stakeholders. For example, look at this mind map. So you can have different staffs, the accounting, the finance staff, the sales staff, the shopper staff, and the concierge staff. Likewise, what are the requirements they specify? What are the requirements this group of staff specify? What are the requirements the finance staff has specified? And a mind map will help you to give a clear single shot view of all the requirements, and you might be able to relate certain interdependencies or interrelated requirements, so that since mind map will show all the requirements in one screen, it will be easy for your team to capture any dependencies or any relationships between requirements. For example, another example, and requirements of an e-portal system. So you can be operational requirements, requirements of the business development team, requirement of your sales team, requirements or sometimes you can break into requirements of phase 1. So these are the phase 1 requirements that you are going to deliver. These are the phase 2 requirements that you are going to deliver. So likewise, mind map will help you to organize the requirements that you capture. Also, some mind map software will allow you to put out screenshots so that you can put screenshots once you're discussing with your stakeholders. You can capture certain screenshots and paste it as it is, so that when your team is going back in developing your requirement scope documents, it will be an easy reference. Nominal group technique is another technique where where a group of people come together, and where first every group of member is given an opportunity to express their ideas, and then the group will try to eliminate any duplicate ideas among all the listed solutions, and finally they will start ranking all the individual ideas, so that this will be the best idea, the second best idea, third idea, fourth idea, and so on. Facilitated workshops, again, joint application development. So this is where at JAD, in software development, you encourage in capturing the business requirement and business analysis. In JAD, in joint application development, you encourage your client to be included always in the development process. So joint application development or the JAD sessions or the JAD workshop sessions will encourage your client and user always engaged and collaborating with your development team. JAD is a collaborative workshop. So there are some benefits in doing a joint application development workshops, where all your IT team, your development team, and your business users come together and try to discuss the requirements. So one of the key advantages is that it breaks down the norm of them and us barrier. So we are the developers and they are the users, and we are the software development company and they are the clients. So it will help you to break into the barrier between them and us, and also it is an opportunity for the business staff to understand the limitations of IT. You would know a business staff sometimes would be asking many requirements that cannot be met technically. So being IT technical staff also in the joint application development discussion workshops, it will help the IT staff to voice out any technical limitations of the requirements then and there, so that the business staff will also have a first-hand understanding of the IT issues that the IT staff face in matching the requirements that they specify. And also they will be getting involved in the work breakdown structure, and it will help to resolve conflicts. And the workshops, the joint application development workshop, will be scripted sessions or time box sessions, and it will be brainstorming sessions. And the participants will be the business staff, the technical staff, and there could be a facilitator for the joint application development workshop. Some of the other tools that can be used, you as a project manager can perform the skills of group decision making. So in workshops or in focus groups meetings, basically there will be group decision making. So when requirements are spelled out in a group meetings, maybe the some changes unanimously they agree. Sometimes you might have to go to majority. Sometimes you might have to go for a plurality, so that only few persons agree, and you will have to take decisions based on that. Or sometimes you, as a project manager, you can use your dictatorship and try to control and the requirements that is spelled out by the end users. Also, you can use questionnaires and surveys in gathering your requirements. Say, for example, you're developing and an e-portal system for your organization. Sometimes you might decide to send a questionnaire to your to your customers and ask the requirements. What do they expect from an e-portal or internet banking system when they log in into the internet banking system? What services that they would prefer to have? Likewise, you can send questionnaires and surveys to your customers so that they can revert back to you. These are the expected preferred features of an internet banking system if you are going to develop. Again, sometimes observation is the best method of collecting requirements. Maybe you go behind shadowing and to see and observe how the business function is working. If you are putting a warehouse system, you can go to the warehouse and observe for a few days how the people are working, what are the documents getting exchanged, what is the process that they use step by step, and what is the stock taking process. So likewise, you can use observation as a tool in collecting requirements. Also, you can use prototypes, especially in iterative cycles. End of each iterative cycle, there can be a workable, shippable product that will be an output, and that would be the basis of a prototype, so that the customers have a feel and give you instant feedback, which can be used at the next iterative cycle. Benchmarking is also a tool that can be used. Maybe you are implementing a ERP system, and you will have to see how comparable organizations, how your competitors are comparable worldwide, how they use the ERP system. Maybe you are a project manager implementing an ERP system to a tire manufacturing company, and sometimes it will be definitely beneficial you to understand how other advanced markets, tire companies in other countries, how they use, what is the best practice they use, and what is the process that they use in certain business activities, which will be a direct input in gathering requirements. Again, context diagrams, if you can see from your early studies, context diagram, although it is a very simple initial fundamental diagram, it's a very powerful diagram that can be used in collecting requirements. If you can see, this is a system context diagram, and it will give you the boundaries of systems, what are the parameters that will get passed between the systems and the stakeholders or the entities. So this is a very powerful basic diagram in collecting requirements. Going back, any document analysis also will give you as a project manager and your team on a good idea about your requirements, any business plans of your customers, any marketing literature of your customer, that will give you a good insight of what are the products and services that they sell when you go and implement an ERP system. Your agreement with the customer will also contain the high-level scope of the project. Maybe the requirements, the RFP, the requirements, the request for proposal that you submitted your quotation for your ERP system, the RFP that was published by the customer, have a detailed section of the functional requirements of the system. any logical data models, any current process flows of the diagrams of your customer. With all these documents will be handy in unveiling the requirements of your customer. So the outputs of correct requirements process will be the requirements documentation. The requirement documentation describes how individual requirements meet the business need of your project. So the requirement documentation will have the business requirements, the solution, as we discussed, solutions, the technical, functional, non-functional, transition requirements that we discussed short while ago. All these requirements will be cataloged on the requirements documentation. And these are the type of requirements that we discussed earlier also that could be cataloged in the requirements documentation. And also an output of correct requirements would be the requirement traceability matrix and a grid of all the requirements, giving a number to your requirement. Number 1, this is the requirement, and who set that requirement, what is the business need of that requirement, what is the final goal of that requirement, and what is the test strategy of that requirement. Maybe you had a concurrent user, 100 concurrent users has to log in at a given time as a system requirement. What is the test strategy? What are the test scenarios for that? So likewise, you can have a traceability matrix. Each requirement given an ID and who said that, and what are the objectives and test cases, development, product development features of that requirement. So by this way, you will be able to capture all the requirements of your project. So if you like our video, please subscribe to our channel.